Contingency log, number 123. Codename, the Bulworth Bully. What allows the little guy to be completely ruled by those stronger than themselves? When does the disparity between them become the norm, to a point where none are able to repair said problem? And why would something like that be allowed to happen in the first place? I believe it to happen when those who can help choose to turn a blind eye away from the suffrage, perhaps due to a lack of desire to help, or maybe due to some unseen corruption to allow the status quo to continue unrestricted. No matter the reason, when things like this happen, when the voice of the frail are drowned out by the strong, sometimes it takes someone who could be part of the problem, seeing that they could stop it themselves. You can apply this logic to many different moments in one's life. But I believe that the further back we go, the more important this can be when handled. But it also shows just how pure one's decision to be a protector can truly be. Which brings me to Jimmy Hopkins, a simple high schooler who has the morals to see that the weak should not be pushed around, but also had the strength to make it stop happening with his own hands. Unfortunately for him, having an attitude such as this does not typically bode well in the minds of those who refused to see the problems, even when being told about it directly. And yet Jimmy wouldn't let that stop him. Not when placed in a new environment. Not when having the entire school board already breathing down his neck. And especially not when he's faced against a school with several factions at war with one another. If anything, he may revel at the idea, as he has no qualms with facing odds that may be against him. And given he is short for his age, this happens a lot more often than not. However, short as he may be, Jimmy has managed to compensate that with being a lot stronger than what his size would imply. He's strong enough to handle several other students at once, not just normal students, but even capable of fighting several members of the school's football team alone. Not only are these students athletically trained, but they are also protected by their padding, all while Jimmy is wearing a mascot costume, something I'm sure would have hindered his movements considerably. Odds like this would usually spell doom for someone like him, but he'd managed to come out on top, not just because he was strong enough, but because he also had the skill to make it through the battle. Something that would come in handy for other bouts with the student body. One of the highest examples of this would be Jimmy's battle against the boy known as Russell. While Jimmy may be short for his age, Russell is the opposite. Standing at over 6 feet tall and nearly 400 pounds of muscle, Russell is one, if not the strongest of the opponents which Jimmy had found himself pitted against. And yet Jimmy had managed to fight against him on equal footing. Not just because he had strength on par with Russell, but Jimmy was able to take full advantage of a simple fact, which was that Russell was all brawn and no brains. Throwing his power around with no real thought put behind it, Jimmy managed to use Russell's strength against him, showing a high level of adaptation, allowing him to defeat an opponent he'd only just met. But Jimmy is also surprisingly as tough as he is strong, and is capable of taking a lot more punishment than even an adult could withstand. As mentioned, he managed to trade blows with Russell, someone strong enough to break through a locked metal gate with his head alone. He probably should have gotten that checked after that. But he's also managed to hold his own when faced against Norton Williams, a boy who wields a sledgehammer, one with a head almost twice the size of his head, and yet he can withstand being struck with such a weapon a few times. I'd argue that surviving being hit even once by this without serious injury is impressive enough, meaning Jimmy may possibly have some level of superhuman durability. But I believe that Jimmy's most impressive or endearing aspect would be that he is far more than just a bruiser. Sure, he may solve a lot of problems through brute force, beating any opposition with his fists. But he isn't simply doing this because he can, but to show that he is capable of doing so. For after he's shown that he is capable of defeating his opponent, Jimmy would often turn towards diplomacy, making opposing school factions agree to end their torment of other students, namely the school nerds. It's a show of force, no matter how you wish to interpret it, but it's done out of necessity rather than for the sake of pushing someone around. Placing himself above everyone else so that he may control the other factions and force them to be at peace with one another. It's not a perfect solution, but it did work. At least, before everything seemed to fall apart. Granted, this was not because of him directly, though he did seem to let the new fame get to his head, but rather because he was secretly being used by another student, bringing up an exploitable weakness of his, which is that Jimmy isn't quite the brightest student. I know, big surprise for someone who has been kicked out of multiple schools for fighting. Not only had this made it easy for others to take full advantage of him, but also shows that Jimmy is not the best judgment of character, as this has come back to bite him on several occasions. Fortunately, he did manage to overcome and learn from his mistakes. I see Jimmy as a potential problem, as he is still developing and learning about the world around him. Only 15, with little to no professional training, and he's far more powerful than even adults at that age. And I'd imagine he will grow stronger the older he gets, which could shape his development more than one could imagine. As such, I need to keep an eye on him, not just so that I can step in should he start to hedge off the right path, but also to ensure he gains some guidance along the way. I have prepared for several people to show up in order to properly train him. Wildcat specifically, to help not only in teaching him more than just the basics of combat, but also act as a moral guide to prevent Jimmy from letting the power get to his head. Wildcat never really has to be convinced when it comes to training kids. I can only hope his training doesn't go to waste.